Good evening. Welcome to Talk Ottawa. We're going to talk about playgrounds tonight. A very interesting topic, and there's a lot of interesting things that are happening in other countries. We're going to start by showing you some pictures of a revolutionary playground in the United Kingdom. You'll see that there are no swings, no slides. Doesn't look like your typical playground. Instead, there's a bit of a frayed rope swing. There's some mud. There's some graffiti on the walls. There are unused tires. And there are fires that have actually been started by some of the kids. This is called The Land, and it's an adventure playground where the traditional rules have been thrown out the window. The kids are left to explore, conquer the area alone, and yes, even risk injury. And then on the other side of the world, there's a school in New Zealand that has abandoned their playground rules to allow kids to behave in a risky way. So far, the project has been successful. The school has reported a decrease in bullying, in tattling, and even in the number of injuries. And they've also seen an increase in how focused students are when they're in the classroom. So we're going to talk about what lessons we can learn from this, from these two examples. I'm joined by City Councillor for Bay Ward and also a member of the city's Community and Protective Services Committee, Mark Taylor. Also joining us tonight is Walter Piovesan, who is the Associate Director of Education for the Ottawa-Carleton District School Board. And we are joined by Andrea Tompkins, who is the editor of Capital Parent newspaper. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So what do you think about this, Mark? What do you think there is room to have this kind of playground in our city?
Well, looking at the media coverage of The Land, and using that as a model, I'm not entirely sure that that folks would be on side with letting kids start fires in park space. Having said that,
might be a bit of an extreme example.
It's a bit of a push, yeah.
Yeah.
Having said that, the city has. We're most familiar with the city having parks with play structures and that kind of thing. The city does have space that's zoned as open parkland or passive parkland. And so on that type of land, there's nothing there usually, maybe a path that goes through it. And that's where we see these kind of ad hoc structures. So sometimes kids build forts, or there's informal BMX trails across the space or whatever. And we tend to, if there's structures and things built, we tend to tolerate them until we kind of come through on a regular cleanup schedule, and we remove them type of thing. So I think there's a little bit of a room for it. I will say this, we haven't had, to my knowledge, any calls from folks saying, we want this. On the flip side, even on our quote-unquote proper active parks, ones with play structures, that type of thing, we don't patrol them. We don't have staff there monitoring to make sure people are behaving.
Right. So, and you don't get a lot of reports of injuries, I don't think.
No, we don't. And the ones where we have in the past or are likely to, and these tend to be things like places where there's wading pools or where there's sledding hills. We do put up signs saying these are the rules. So we do, kind of advise people that there's an extra set of rules in place. But again, we don't stand there. We do in the case of pools, but not the sledding hills. Right. We don't monitor them.
Meaning that if kids want to roam free and explore, they can do that. There's nothing stopping them. Really.
They can, and again, we do have rules in place, but most of the rules we have in place in our parks and facilities bylaws are kind of the common sense rules. You can't shoot a bow and arrow in a park. You can't fire off golf balls in a park type of thing. But they're ones generally you don't have to tell anybody these are the rules. They just tend to observe them.
We're talking about playgrounds and whether there's a different way to approach them that would allow kids more freedom to roam, maybe even the risk of injury, but would teach them more lessons, let them burn off more steam. There are some examples in other jurisdictions that seem to point to that. And Councillor Taylor, you're suggesting, I think, that this is part of a wider trend that we have in our world today of bubble wrapping our kids, of being overly protective of them, which obviously is well-meaning, but we have to examine whether or not it gets us the results we want.
Yeah, sure. And I'm a parent. I have a 13-year-old daughter, 19-year-old daughter, so they're a little ways from playground age. But as you were saying, I remember when you were a young parent, you wanted to protect your kids. I think we do that to the nth degree nowadays, and you know, it perhaps takes some of the challenge, some of the risk out of life. Yes, it keeps them safe, but at the same time, you know, what are you removing? What are you losing? You're losing the notion of challenge. You're losing the notion of adversity in life, that things might not work out the way you want them to. And those are valuable lessons, I think, for kids to learn. I mean, with my you know, city councillor hat on from a parks perspective, our job is to try and provide the, you know, the space. And we normally build parks in consultation with the community around it. But as to what goes on there, I think that's part of a broader community discussion about, you know, well, what are the things that our community wants to encourage, you know, developmentally in our kids. Our biggest challenge from a parks perspective right now, quite honestly, is you know, trying to bring them into compliance and make them accessible for children and folks who have, you know, especially mobility challenges, to make sure that every child has access to the park if they want to go there.
Mark, is there room for any type of change in how the city operates with regard to playgrounds? Could we try, are you looking at different equipment or different rules, anything like that?
Well, I mean, to a large degree, the equipment that we purchase is really driven by what's available, which as a result of kind of this evolution has become this, you know, to some degree, ultra-safe type equipment. But most of our parks aren't designed in isolation. They're usually designed with, you know, some community consultation with the community around them. And so if there's a willingness, you know, in the community to explore those types of things, then we're certainly willing to do it. We put a park in my ward last year. It was the first park built in my ward in close to 30 years. And there is play equipment in it. But, you know, we've also subbed out some of the things that, you know, we traditionally would put into parks for some of the more natural elements. So it's a graded park, so instead of having, you know, stairs going down, which is what we, with a handrail, which is what we would have put in at one point, we just put, you know, large rocks, large boulders, and, you know, if you want to get down to the play structure at the bottom, you can, you know, just step down on the rocks. So there was a desire in that community to have kind of these natural features. Let people play with, you know, the pine cones, let them play with, you know, come up with some game with, you know, the natural elements, not just, you know, the fixed swing and that type of thing. So, you know, there's lots of flexibility to do it. You know, if there's a will there on behalf of the community, I mean, and the parents, and as you were saying, you know, play play can happen everywhere. It's not limited to the backyards as well. I remember when I was a kid, if it was a rainy day, you took all the furniture and you made it into a fort. And I learned the consequences from, you know, my mother if I didn't put all the furniture back. So those are good lessons to learn, and I don't think we should be denying our kids those lessons just because we're afraid.